Hello friends, I'm Joy Chu, a former scientist turned content creator, and the goal of my YouTube channel is to help home cooks become more confident with science. This is part 2 in a 3-part series on bread, so if you missed part 1, go ahead and click on the card up top to catch up. For part 2, I wanted to go through the process of making Japanese milk bread in more detail than I did in part 1. I'll be sharing an easy science-based alternative that doesn't require the tangzhong method, but still gives you that classic soft, fluffy, cottony interior. So what is tangzhong? Tangzhong is a cooked flour and water paste that keeps your bread soft and moist for longer. But the tangzhong method requires an extra step plus cooling time, which means a longer wait to get to that delicious bread. What if there was a way to circumvent that step but still get similar results? Here's what I propose. Skip the tangzhong method and use half and half instead of milk. And to help the bread rise, add egg whites. My husband eating 1/3 of a loaf in one sitting should be enough proof that this is just as tasty as the OG. But since you haven't tasted the bread yet, let's bake it together and see what happens. To make the dough, first I'm adding all of my dry ingredients. 450 grams of bread flour, 1 1/8 teaspoon of instant yeast, and 1 1/8 teaspoon of table salt, and mixing them to combine. Then I'll dissolve 27 grams of granulated sugar in 270 grams of warm half and half to make the fermentation process easier for the yeast. Next, I'll add this mixture into the dry ingredients, along with 63 grams of room temperature egg whites. Okay, so what's the science behind this? Because half and half has both milk and heavy cream, the extra fat in the cream functions to keep the dough soft, rich, and tender. But with less water in the cream, we need something else to help the bread rise. Egg whites are perfect for this because they aerate really easily when beaten, so they'll give the bread extra air pockets needed for leavening. Now that all the ingredients have been added, I'm bringing them together with my stand mixer. Once the dough becomes cohesive, I'll knead it at medium speed. This is completely optional, but here's a little kneading secret. I've discovered that using the food processor additionally is much more efficient than kneading in a stand mixer alone. When the dough stops being tacky, I divide it into smaller batches and pulse each batch with small chunks of room temperature butter. Adding the butter later in the kneading process is important because the fat inhibits gluten formation, so saving it for the end allows the gluten to develop as much as possible in the beginning. What's amazing is that getting the dough to the ideal window pane stage took 1 to 2 minutes in the food processor, compared to another 10 to 15 minutes in the stand mixer. So now that the gluten is sufficiently strong and elastic, I'm adding my combined dough to a large greased bowl. I'll let it proof at room temperature while covered, about an hour and a half. And voila! An hour and a half later, the dough has doubled in volume. First, I'm going to punch out all the air. You want the dough to feel pillowy because that's going to translate into the soft, fluffy texture we all love from Japanese milk bread. Next, I'm going to divide the dough into 3 pieces. For the first piece, I'm rolling it out into a large rectangle and then making a snail shape. Once it's rolled, I'll put it into a greased Pullman pan and do the same with the rest of the pieces. As a pro tip, when you knead dough, you're winding up gluten proteins, so you have to leave them alone for a while to relax and straighten out again. I'm going to let the dough rest for another hour and a half, and we're back. The dough has rested and risen quite nicely at this point. I preheated the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit during the resting stage, and now I'm going to brush the dough with an egg wash mixed with some half and half. Then it's off to the middle rack of the oven for 20 minutes. Midway through, I'd like to cover the loaf with foil to keep the top from burning, and the loaf will continue to bake for another 25 to 30 minutes. To ensure the dough is fully cooked through, check that the internal temperature is higher than 190 degrees Fahrenheit. It's time to break the loaf open and enjoy the incredibly soft, feathery texture of this bread. Once you taste it, you won't be able to stop. Thanks for watching. To get the recipe for my Japanese milk bread, subscribe to my free Substack newsletter. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe to the channel below. Remember that I'll be posting one more video as part of my 3-part series, So come back on Saturday to check out part 3. I'll see you on Saturday.